Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. My name is Emmanuel Cyprian. In this video, I want to share with you your job responsibilities. That is the job responsibilities of a GRC or risk management framework analyst under the cybersecurity side of IT. So if you are looking at getting into cybersecurity, and you want to focus on the GRC part of cybersecurity, when I mean GRC, that is governance, risk, and compliance, which is, also we have the risk management framework. Now, there are job responsibilities or job tasks that falls under this particular side of cybersecurity. So that is what I want to share with you in these few minutes of this video. So when you are looking to get into that space of cybersecurity, either as a GRC or risk management framework, you need to understand risk assessment framework. Now there are different frameworks out there. So you need to understand the what's it called now? The COBIT, you need to understand the NIST framework, you need to understand the ISO framework, and each one of them has their own, risk assessment. How is risk assessment conducted? What is risk? Risk is the end product of impact and likelihood. Risk is the end product of impact and likelihood, meaning that you need to understand what is the likelihood, what is the impact. Understanding both will give you risk. So part of your job responsibility in GRC and in risk management framework is understanding how to determine risk assessment. Another job responsibility is implementation of security controls. First of all, you need to understand what are security controls. So if you want to specialize or you want to migrate or go into this GRC space of cybersecurity, you must understand what is security controls and then how are these security controls implemented. Now, when you say security controls, we're talking about the access control, awareness and training, audit and accountability, contingency planning, configuration management plan, incident response, identity and access management. These are examples of security control families. Now, how are these controls implemented? Who implements these controls? So you need to understand them. You need to understand how these controls are implemented. So let me give you an example. An example of how control is implemented is, take for example, they want to build up a server. A server needs to be configured. So that configuration part of a server is they implementing security control, meaning that we want to make sure we reduce attack surface. The options or the settings that needs to be turned on that server is turned on. The settings that needs to be turned off is turned off. Now, that is implementation of control. Who does that implementation? The system administrator or the database administrator or the firewall administrator or the network administrator. So these are the folks that does the actual implementation. And also a security engineer could also be doing the implementation of security controls. Now, if you're hired as a security engineer and you are, conducting either a vulnerability scan or a penetration testing, that is also implementation of control. So you need to understand what implementation of control means because it's part of our job responsibility when it comes to the GRC part of cybersecurity. And then you also need to understand how to develop security policies, procedures, and standards. Remember I said GRC means governance, risk, and compliance. So go watch my videos on GRC. I have like 3 or 4 part video on GRC. Now, on the governance side, they are responsible for developing cybersecurity policies, cybersecurity standards, cybersecurity procedures, all of that. So it's part of our job responsibility in the GRC space of cybersecurity to know how to develop cybersecurity policies, standards, procedures. Another job responsibility in the GRC space is assessing and managing security risk. I told you how risks are being assessed. Now, you must first of all, for risk to be assessed, you first of all have to understand the vulnerability. When you understand the vulnerability, then you want to also understand the threat. When you understand the threat, you want to determine the likelihood of the threat taking advantage of the vulnerability, and then what will be the impact if the threat takes advantage of the vulnerability. That will give you your risk. So how do you assess risk? How do you manage risk? Risk management falls under four categories. That is, how does organization manage risk? Organization can manage risk either by accepting risk, by remediating risk, by transferring risk, or by avoiding risk. It's part of our job responsibility in the GRC space that you understand assessing and managing security risk. Now, another job responsibility is developing a risk register or POAM. Now, what is risk register? Please read it up. What is POAM? POAM means plan of action and milestone. It is our job responsibility to understand what is POAM, what is risk register, and what goes into these documentations, these documents. What goes into them? Now, there are findings that comes out either out of security control assessment, vulnerability scanning, penetration testing, whatever. And those findings cannot be immediately remediated. So what happens? We cannot leave those findings just hanging around. We need to document them somewhere. So we either document them in risk register or in the plan of action and milestone. So it's part of our job responsibility. Another of our job responsibility is assessing vendors' risk compliance. Now, that is under the third party or vendor risk management program. It's part of GRC. And what does that mean? It means that the vendors that wants to do business with our organization, we need to know how security compliant they are. And how do we know that? We ask them some questions. Either we are using the CAIQ questionnaire or we are using the SEEK questionnaire. And all of these questionnaires, they are all under security control. So they are all those questionnaires are security control questionnaires. Now they will respond to those questionnaires. You review those questionnaires, you review their response, ask them for additional artifacts, and then maybe some other things. You just want to ensure that they have implemented enough security controls in their own environment, and also those controls are implemented properly. They are working as intended. So that is part of our responsibility, job responsibility in the GRC space. Another of our job responsibility is investigating information security risk and exemptions. Now, there are some risks that cannot be immediately remediated that we're going to be accepting as an organization. Now, before they accept that risk, there must be a justification why that risk needs to be accepted. There must be a business reason. So that business reason needs to be documented, and someone needs to sign off on it or approve it. So it is our job responsibility as a GRC analyst to put together this business justification, review it to making sure that yes, it's actually justifiable, and then sending it to your appropriate manager or supervisor who will approve it. That is part of our job responsibility. And then another of our job responsibility in the GRC space is updating stakeholders on security controls. Now, during the assessment of security controls, or maybe penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, or any assessment, there are findings. Those findings needs to be remediated. Now, how do you explain those findings to non-technical audience? It's our job responsibility to update them. And also it's our job responsibility to explain to non-technical audience or even technical audience the meaning of those security controls. They might not understand what some of those technical meaning of controls are, but it is your responsibility to break it down to them, helping them to understand what those control means. And then another of our job responsibility is conducting security control assessments. Assessing security controls. how do you assess security controls? What are the methods of assessing security controls? You assess security controls by examining documentations, or we call it examining artifacts. You also, interview the stakeholders, and then you perform some testing, that is asking them to show you how those controls are implemented. So these are the three main methods of how you assess or conduct security control assessment, which is also known as IT auditing. So these are some, not all. These are some of the responsibilities, job responsibilities of cybersecurity analyst who is looking into going into the GRC or the risk management framework space. This is not all conclusive. This list is not all conclusive. However, if you have an idea or you want to go into that space of GRC, you need to have an idea, an understanding of these job responsibilities. That is what you're getting yourself into. So you need to understand some of the job responsibilities. So if this video makes sense to you, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like this video, share this video, and drop your comment for any additional job responsibilities that you might be doing on your own, maybe on your current, role in GRC, and I'll greatly appreciate that. Thank you and have a good day.